Welcome to the NASPP's Equity Expert Podcast. I'm Barbara Baksa, and I'm the Executive Director for the NASPP. I'm joined today by Stacie Hoffmeister, who's the Executive Director and Head of Wealth Management, Home Office, Talent, and Diversity at Morgan Stanley. I'm thrilled to get to talk to Stacie today because she is experienced in overseeing mentorship programs, and this is a journey that the NASPP is just about to embark on. We recently announced our new Women Leading in Equity program. This collaboration between the NASPP and Morgan Stanley combines leadership development with one-on-one mentorship. Our goal for this program is to help women at various stages of their careers establish and leverage supportive relationships while also building the skills to stand out as leaders. Because mentorship programs are new to the NASPP, I thought it would be interesting to talk to Stacie, who has firsthand experience with how mentorship programs work and the benefits that they offer for both mentees and mentors. Before we start the podcast, however, I want to remind our listeners that today's episode is part of the NASPP's Equity Expert Podcast series, which features interviews with industry luminaries on stock and executive compensation and career-related topics. You can listen and subscribe to this series on the NASPP website or your favorite podcast player. All right, and with that, let's go ahead and get started with our program today. So welcome to our podcast, Stacie.
Hey, Barbara, thanks so much for having me. Glad to be here.
Oh, we're so happy to have you. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. But first, before we get into the sort of meat of this, let's just start with a little background for our listeners. Can you tell us a little bit about what you currently do for Morgan Stanley and the career path that you took to get to your current role?
Sure. So I am not the head of talent and diversity, but I am a head of talent and diversity for a division within Morgan Stanley focused in our wealth management business and the corporate folks who support our financial advisors in branch management, which we call home office. So in this role, I am responsible for architecting and delivering programs that help us retain and develop our talent. And in my diversity and inclusion role, I'm also responsible for ensuring that we meet our representation objectives as well as our goals in terms of sentiment around inclusion. The career path that I took to get here was a twisty one, I'll have to say, where there's a lot of serendipity. There was a lot of following my energy and landing in a place that honestly, if anyone would have told me when I was a freshman in college that one day I would be in this role at a financial services institution, I would have said, you are lying. Not possible. This English major will never work for a financial services institution. And here I am, and I'm loving it. I started my career actually in, I was an English major and did a lot of work in writing as well, and went into the film industry in the story departments within film for a couple of years, and then pivoted into brand marketing for the cosmetics and fragrance industry. Spent quite a bit of time there working for some very well-known companies. Got my MBA in marketing and innovation, and then pivoted to wine and spirits in the same types of functions in marketing and innovation, new product development. And then pivoted to learning and development. I had my own practice for several years and then moved to Morgan Stanley, where I started in talent and development, and then my role expanded to include diversity and inclusion.
Yeah, wow, that is very circuitous. And I was an English major as well, so I am somewhat familiar with circuitous career paths. And as are most of our listeners, no one goes to school to study to be a stock plan administrator. So I think everyone can probably identify with your career path.
Well, just a plug for English majors out there. It's such a great foundation. What I've learned over the years is that when you can communicate well verbally and in writing, those are skills that are transferable to any profession and really help you to stand out. So I'm a big proponent of English majors.
I agree. I didn't know what I wanted to do when I was in college. I really just had no idea. And being an English major really sort of prepared me for a wide variety of career paths. And I think if I'd pigeonholed myself into something like a math career, I would have ended up very unhappy, even though I end up doing a lot of math now.
Same.
All right, well, but we digress from our topic today. What I really want to talk about is mentorship programs. And you have mentioned to me that you found mentorship to be a really valuable part of learning and development. So I'm wondering if you could share with me why you like to use mentor programs in your learning and development strategies.
Sure. So a lot of it has to do with actually what we just described. No one really studies how to be a stock plan administrator in college. No one really studies how to be a talent and diversity executive in college either, nor do they study how to be a marketeer. These are all professions where you learn on the job, which means that usually there's going to be a very strong apprentice culture. And when you have an apprentice culture, one way to help convey the culture of an organization, the culture of a profession, and also just the skills of a profession is through mentorship. And there are times when mentor relationships can be explicit. Barbara, will you be my mentor? Yes, Stacie, I will be your mentor. And there's times when it's implicit, where you may have a manager or a more senior team member or a peer who takes you under their wing and really just breaks down for you some of the, what I call the glue, the connecting points between either tasks or people or relationships that you would figure out on your own because you're smart, but it helps you get there a little bit faster when you have someone helping to point out the things for you that you may not see right away. So mentorship programs definitely can help accelerate learning when you are working in an apprentice culture. A couple of other facets of mentorship programs that I think are conducive to learning are the networking skills that you build by leveraging others to learn. So building the skills of asking questions, of introducing yourself maybe to someone that you don't know. Also being able to help collaborate with others to navigate a problem are all part of what happens in mentorship conversations. So by going through these exchanges, you help create very meaningful connections with others, which is the best way to build a network. I love networking, said no one for the most part, but these types of relationships do actually build your network in a way that is palatable and meaningful. And then lastly, I'll say there is a reciprocity, there should be anyway, in good mentorship relationships where both the mentor and the mentee are learning from each other. So it's not just the person who is more junior or more inexperienced or who has something to learn about a specific explicit task that's gaining value, but also the person who is in the role of mentor who is also learning. So as a mentee or a protege, I might be bringing to my mentor a fresh perspective or insight in an area of knowledge that they don't have. Or I might be exposing them to a different area of the business that they may not be aware of. So again, I think in productive mentor-mentee relationships, there's always a reciprocity of learning, which is beneficial.
That's very helpful. And I think a really nice overview of what a mentorship program is and what a mentor relationship is. I did want to talk about some of the just very specific benefits to the participants in a mentor program, starting with the mentees. Why should new professionals consider participating in a mentor program?
That goes back to the relationships piece. I have yet to see a professional track where having meaningful connections and relationships were not helpful. And when you're new, that's one of the first things you've got to try to build quickly is your network and your pattern of connections. And a mentorship program is a way to help accelerate that. So in a structured mentorship program, you're going to be paired with someone that has a network. So not only are you exposed to that individual, but you also have access to that individual's network. And they're in a position to help make warm introductions for you, which are always more effective than cold introductions. That's very, very valuable when you're new. Beyond the relationship piece, there's also just the learning of the culture of the profession and of the firm that you're in. And again, a mentor can help articulate and point out things that you may not see right away, or just help explain how things work, ways of working, what norms are, so that you can avoid some landmines as someone new. And that just gives more confidence and more ease. It's hard starting in a new profession or starting in a new company. A mentor can help ease that entry.
I think that's really valuable in the field of stock compensation. I've never actually worked as a stock plan administrator. I've always worked on the service provider side of stock compensation. So I've always been fortunate to have other people at the companies that I worked for who could mentor me, who did the same job that I did. But for most stock plan professionals, that's not the case. They're often very siloed. They're oftentimes the only person at their company who does what they do, and everyone else at their company is sort of looking at them to have all the answers. So it feels like the benefits that you're talking about being in a mentorship program could be really valuable to them, because it would give them a resource and a network of people that they could look to when they're trying to find the answers, since they oftentimes can't look internally.
Barbara, that's a great point. And with a professional organization like the one that you represent, that's a great point. So even if you don't have a set of peers within your organization, having an opportunity to pair up with a mentor who knows your profession but doesn't sit in your organization is very, very valuable as well.
Great. That, I think, covers the benefits for the mentees, but let's talk about the mentors. I think you've already talked a little bit about the reciprocal learning, but what's really in it for the mentors? What do they get out of participating?
Yeah, I'm going back to some of the feedback I've heard from mentors who've participated in the programs that I've run. And what often floats to the top in terms of feedback is a lot of gratitude around getting to know another area of the business, or another team, or just another aspect of an industry that a mentor may thought they knew well, but just seeing situations or projects through fresh eyes, and sometimes with a nuance or a difference in terms of projects than maybe what they had worked on when they were at that level, just is it's refreshing. It's something that gives a mentor a lot of joy, actually. And I find that people who opt in to mentor others generally are folks who enjoy helping and who enjoy giving back. At Morgan Stanley, giving back is one of our core values. So thankfully, I do not have a problem finding mentors. People are always raising their hands to help others. And when you have that kind of outlook, I've worked in other companies that have been extremely competitive, not as collaborative, where it definitely would be hard to find a mentor. And honestly, when I think back to my tenure at those companies, there were no formal mentorship programs. It just wasn't a part of the culture. Where I would say, now what I see is that there's so much joy in just giving back and helping others. It helps cement for the mentor their own almost stature and their own level of expertise. It's like when you're able to teach someone and share out of your experience, it helps give your own path some meaning. So, now I described a bit my twisty, turny path from being an English major to being an executive director at a financial services firm. That, when I speak to others who may not have very linear career paths, and I talk to them about my experience in a mentorship or coaching manner, it gives my own path a bit more meaning. And I feel a bit as if, okay, my journey does mean something, because it's actually illuminating a path for someone else.
That's great. That's great. So we've talked about sort of the benefits. Let's talk a little bit more about the mechanics of the program. What can mentees do to really make sure they're getting the most out of participating in the program?
Sure. As a mentee, I think it's important to understand that the maintenance of the mentee mentor relationship actually falls on the mentee. Sometimes when folks are new to these structured types of programs, there's a question as to who owns this, or who should schedule the meeting, or if I haven't heard from my mentor, should I wait for them to reach out to me? Like, who's going to call who first? I think as the mentee, if you assume responsibility for the maintenance of the of their relationship, it's easier in a way because then okay, it's on me to make sure that I am establishing a meeting cadence that the mentor and I have agreed to. Administrative responsibility of setting up meetings, of determining how long they're going to be, is up to the mentee to bring up and to discuss with the mentor and to ensure that whatever you discuss and agree to takes place. The other thing that a mentee can do to get the most out of the program is think about your long-term goals. When I say long-term, I'm using air quotes. You can't see me doing it because this is a podcast. But by long-term, it doesn't have to be whatever long-term means for you. For some people, a year out is long-term. For some people, 5 years out is long-term. But have a sense of, what that goal is. It could be, I want to learn more about this area of my career. It could be, I want to advance in my company. It could be, I want to I want to become a mentor myself. Whatever it is, it's important to have that in mind because that can help you shape the conversations you're having with your mentor and determine what topics you're bringing up to them. It's helpful in a way to have a long-term topic that you are talking about with your mentor, and you can talk about different facets of it. You can also have completely unrelated and different topics that you bring up every time. That can be a little bit harder to maintain because then the pressure is on to kind of think of something each time you meet, where if you've already identified a longer term objective, there's usually different facets of that you can bring up in your various meetings with your mentor. The other thing that you can do to get the most out of your mentor is respect their time. Be on time. If you're only meeting for 30 minutes, make sure you end at the 29-minute mark. If it's 60 minutes, make sure you end at the 58, 59-minute mark. Show up on time. Make sure that you have good connectivity if you're speaking over the phone or if you're speaking virtually. Make sure that you're in a quiet place and there isn't lots of noise going around. Just treat it like an important meeting and show up prepared. I know we'll talk in a bit about how a mentee should prepare, so I'll save some of those points for that. But just show up prepared. And when the mentor sees that you are valuing their time, they are more likely to bring their best to the conversation with you and be amenable to meeting with you again. Ultimately, when you're in a structured mentorship program, the best outcome is that when the structured part is over, you and the mentor have established a meaningful enough connection that this person is still someone that you can call upon and meet with after the structured part is over. That doesn't always happen, and that's okay too. There's still value that you'll get from the meetings that you've had during the structured part of the relationship. But ideally, you want to show up in a way that the mentor feels invested and connected and wants to keep the relationship going.
Thanks. That makes a lot of sense to me. When you were talking, I was just thinking there's an adage somewhere about advice and how nobody wants advice that they haven't asked for. I'm not getting it quite right, but it's basically that idea. And I feel like that sort of goes to what you were saying here is this whole relationship is about the mentee getting what they want out of it. And so it's important for them to take some leadership in the relationship and to ask for what they want. And to treat it as important, because it is important. This is your career that you're trying to guide through this program. And so you do want to treat it as important.
That's exactly right. And say thank you. Say thank you. Show appreciation for the mentor's time. And the reality is that the mentor is busy. Not that as a mentee you're not busy, but the mentor is busy and they are giving of their time to be of service to you as the mentee. So things that you can do to show appreciation for that are taking a leadership role and establishing the cadence of the relationship, showing up well and prepared and on time, that's a must, and expressing your gratitude after is important.
Great. Well, let's talk about the mentor's role in the relationship. What's really their responsibility?
Yeah, so as a mentor, I think the most important thing to do is to be present to the mentee. And by that, what I mean is not coming in with your own agenda for them, but really focusing on the agenda of the mentee, which is why mentees, it's so important that you're prepared to help set the agenda. And back to the mentor, to Barbara's point, unsolicited advice is not helpful and can feel judgmental, actually. And that's going to lead to my second point around a mentor's role, which is avoiding judgment. I'll get there in a moment. So being present to your mentee and learning how to ask open questions, such as, what's important for you to get out of this conversation? And all the way to, as open as, tell me about what's happening in your role right now, or where are you in your career? As a mentor, you may find yourself in a position where, depending on the personality of your mentee, where you may need to ask some probing questions to get the relationship started. Make sure that they're open and not narrow, and that they allow the mentee to shape the agenda. My second point, avoiding judgment. I have experienced some mentors who approach these relationships almost as if it's a job interview, and they're judgy. This mentee didn't show up prepared enough for me. This mentee, they're rambling too much. That's not what this is about. The mentee may be nervous. Just having some grace and understanding that you are not there to judge them. You're there to be a coach, to be a guide for them. And yes, it's on the mentee to value and respect your time, and at the same time, have a bit of grace. Chances are they're not going to be as senior as you and may not necessarily know how to show up for these conversations. It might be the first mentorship relationship they've had. So just giving them some grace, take a breath. If they're not showing up the way you want them to, avoid judgment, and try to figure out a way to convey your expectations. First, check yourself and make sure that they're reasonable and appropriate for a mentor-mentee relationship. They're not your employee. They're not there for you to give projects to test out their skills. That's not what this is about. Make sure that your expectations are appropriate for the relationship and figure out a way to express them. So for instance, if you've got a mentee that's showing up 5 minutes late, that's not okay. So addressing that is absolutely appropriate. If you've asked your mentee to rewrite a strategy for a certain division, that's not really appropriate for them or for the relationship. Lastly, I would say, as a mentor, be vulnerable. This is a safe space for you to talk about your failures, your missteps, things that you've learned, and give them some meaning. Because by telling those stories, it will help someone else feel more connected to you. It'll probably help them avoid some of those same mistakes, and you'll be serving your purpose of helping to guide them. So don't be afraid to share from your experience as appropriate to the mentee's topic of discussion or agenda.
Let's also talk about sort of pre-work. Is there pre-work that the mentors and the mentees can do before they meet to ensure that their conversations are productive?
Yeah, in terms of pre-work, again, I think that the leadership on this falls more on the mentee than the mentor. Let's start with the mentor for a moment. I think as a mentor, know who you're speaking with. A simple LinkedIn profile read will do. If there's anyone that you have in common that you might want to get some perspective on your mentee through that relationship with that third party that you have in common, you may or may not want to explore it. But generally, I just feel like the mentors need to bring themselves and just be more mentally prepared, not to dominate the conversation, and again, to be present and to be vulnerable. So I think for the mentor, it's definitely more of showing up with the right intention and mindset. Now, for the mentee, I think there are some very tangible things that a mentee can and should do to prepare. As far as mindsets for the mentee, be open, be willing to be coached, show up in a coachable way. Usually, if you're speaking to someone who's a bit more senior than you, yes, there is that instinct to want to impress. But I would say, try to put that aside and leverage the opportunity to really get help in certain areas where you have genuine need for coaching, where you might be feeling confused, or where you just could benefit from an outside perspective. This should be a safe space for you to mention those things. And again, the more vulnerable you both are, the more likely that you'll establish a meaningful connection that you want to continue when the structured portion of the mentorship ends. Have something to discuss. So that is very important. Again, the mentee should be driving the agenda. One of the most awkward and painful conversations one can have is showing up for a mentor-mentee discussion and the mentee hasn't thought about what they want to talk about. It's just painful for everybody. So you signed up for the program, you want to get an external perspective on your role, on your career path. Just have something tangible to talk about. And that something doesn't mean showing up and just asking the mentor to talk about themselves. That's something I've seen mentees do, and mentors are onto it, and it doesn't always go over well. So parts of their story will come out as you're discussing your topic, but definitely have something that is relatable to you, the mentee, to discuss. You also may want to think about what you want to share with your mentor about you before you go in to meet with them. So for instance, if there's a presentation or a discussion that you have coming up that you want to get your mentor's perspective on, you might want to send them a pre-read. If you can, if the information isn't confidential, of course, you may want to share with them some materials, not a week in advance, but maybe a day or two in advance to say, hey, looking forward to our meeting, ahead of it, I want to talk about a very important presentation I have to the board or to the head of this division, and here are some of my thoughts. Here's a rough draft. You can do that. Now, that's a very, very specific and kind of tactical way to use your mentorship session. You also may want to use a pre-read to help the mentor learn more about you. You may want to send them, if you have goals, if you've written down any strategies and objectives that you want to achieve over the next 3, 6, 9, 12 months, that could be something that you send ahead so that the mentor has a sense of where you are and in your role and how you think. So I think just taking a moment to think ahead of time of almost like it's a meeting. This is a business meeting. What do I need to do to be prepared and to show up well? And what does my mentor need to have in their hands in advance? Or what should I be bringing to the meeting to make sure that the discussion goes well? Have that conversation with yourself prior to your meeting and act accordingly.
Thanks, Stacie. That's very helpful. One follow-up question I have on that is, it sounds like from the mentee standpoint, they can bring a variety of different items that they want guidance on to their meetings with their mentors, from the very tactical, like the example that you gave of having to do a presentation to the board and maybe needing some guidance around that, versus more strategic questions like, I'm at this place in my career, but where I really want to get to is this other place in my career, and what are some steps I should take to move in that direction? Is that true? And can one meeting be tactical and one meeting be strategic, or do mentees maybe need to decide on an overall direction for how they want the relationship to work?
Sure. I believe, and my advice would be, whatever is most important to you at that time is what you should bring up. So back to my earlier point, having a longer term objective in mind, or something that you want to discuss or work with your mentor about, especially when you're in a structured time-bound program and you know how many sessions or meetings you have as part of the structure, you might want to have an overarching topic so that you at least have that in mind, and you don't have to scramble each meeting to figure out, what am I going to say? What am I going to have as my topic? With that said, if something comes up that is more pressing than your overall long-term topic, or if you just don't want to follow my advice, you don't want to do overall long-term project, you don't have to, or topic, you don't have to. But whatever is most pressing for you when you have that meeting, that's what you talk about. And even if you've got this big strategic objective of wanting to evolve your career in a certain way, but hey, I've got a board meeting tomorrow and I actually have a mentor discussion and I know that enough about my mentor to know that they'd be helpful, I'm going to put aside the strategic topic and talk about the tactical one, because that's actually what I need right now. So it's not an either or, it's definitely an and. And again, I think the more honest and vulnerable the mentee and mentors are in how they approach this relationship, the more meaningful the connection will be. And so talking about something that isn't actually as important to you, when you know you've got something that's really important to you and that you're just going to speak about with a degree of candor and intensity, and that will just help the mentor get to know you better, go with that one.
Okay, great. And then just one last question to close things out. If you had just one bit of advice that you would offer to someone thinking about participating in the NASPP Morgan Stanley Mentor Program, what would it be?
Yeah, my advice is to really lean in and fully take advantage of this opportunity. This is a rare opportunity, I'd say. Anytime that you are able to connect with external talent who knows your profession and who is able to give you a fresh perspective on whatever topic that you bring is incredibly valuable from a couple of different standpoints. First, I know that the women that you're targeting as mentees are usually only ones in their roles within their organizations. So you may not have peers there. So, what a great way to build a community of practice with someone who knows your job and who has a bit more who has a bit longer of a track record in doing it. Also, just no matter what profession you're in, having external contacts, meaningful relationships with external folks who are related to your industry and your profession are extremely valuable and can help you as you seek to develop your career, even if it's not right now, years later. So, again, your network, the more senior you get, the more important your network is in helping you land that next career opportunity. So, there's just upside to me in participating in this program. I'm excited about it.
Thanks. So am I. I'm very excited about it. And I've also really enjoyed speaking with you today. It's really helped me to better understand what to expect from the mentor-mentee relationship. And I think this is going to be some really valuable guidance for our members as well. Anyone who's interested in the Women Leading in Equity program can learn more about it and can apply to be a mentor or a mentee at naspp.com. This concludes our program for today. I want to thank Stacie for sharing her time with us, and I also thank our listeners for joining us. If you enjoyed today's episode, please subscribe to the NASPP Equity Expert Podcast on the NASPP website or through your favorite podcast player.